The billionaire was rude to everyone, until the waitress got revenge. Melissa Johnson trembled as she held the plate of filet mignon in red wine sauce with roasted potatoes. Her sweaty hands almost let the plate slip. Around her, executives in blue suits spoke in low voices, all waiting for the owner of that empire to arrive for the morning meeting. She already knew what was coming. More humiliation, more contempt, more pain stuck in her throat that she swallowed every single day. The private dining room of the Riverside restaurant, the most expensive in New York City, was impeccable as always. Melissa had worked there for 3.5 months. Each day seemed to last an eternity, especially when he appeared. The door swung open with a strong push. Richard Blackwell entered as he always did, speaking loudly on the phone, ignoring everyone around him, tossing his Italian leather briefcase onto the main table without even looking to see if anyone was nearby. He was about 40, with neatly styled dark hair, a precisely trimmed beard, and a suit that cost more than Melissa's annual salary. "I don't care what the supplier said," he practically shouted into the phone. "Either deliver by Friday, or I cancel the entire contract. Simple as that." Melissa approached slowly, her heart racing. She carefully placed the plate in front of him, trying not to make a sound. She had already learned that he hated being interrupted. Richard didn't even look at her. He just made a dismissive gesture with his hand, as if shooing away a fly. Melissa stepped back, but he snapped his fingers loudly, getting the attention of the entire room. "You," he pointed without taking his eyes off his cell phone. "You forgot the extra napkin, and the coffee is cold. Always the same incompetence." "Sir, I just served it. The coffee is—" "Are you contradicting me?" Richard finally looked at her, those brown eyes hard as stone. "So you think you know more about coffee than I do?" Melissa lowered her head. She had been through this before. Arguing was useless. "I'm sorry, sir. I'll get another coffee. And since you're going, learn to walk faster. I don't have all day to wait." She returned to the kitchen with her cheeks burning. Chef Marcus, a black man of about 50 who had always been kind to her, shook his head. "Another day in paradise, right, Melissa?" "I can't take it anymore, Marcus. 3 months of this, every day the same thing." "He's like that with everyone. Don't take it personally." "But it is personal," Melissa murmured, more to herself than to the chef. When she returned with the new coffee, Richard was yelling at someone from his team. A young man, probably no more than 25, was red with shame as his boss listed all his mistakes in front of everyone. "Incompetent, that's what you are. My 12-year-old nephew could do a better job than this." Melissa placed the coffee on the table. This time Richard picked up the cup, took a sip, and spat it back out. "What crap is this? Tastes like dirty water." "Sir, it's the same coffee you have every day." "Are you calling me a liar now?" Richard stood up from his chair. He was tall, probably over 6 feet. Melissa shrank back. "Do you know how much I pay to eat in this place? And you serve me this garbage?" He took his wallet from his suit jacket's inner pocket, pulled out a $50 bill, and threw it on the floor at her feet. "Pick it up," he ordered. "Since you do a dog's work, bark to pick it up." The silence in the room was absolute. All the executives looked down, pretending not to see anything. The young man who had been humiliated moments before was pale. Marcus had stopped in the kitchen doorway, witnessing everything. Melissa looked at the bill on the floor. It wasn't the first time. Last week, he had done the same thing. The month before, too. Always throwing money on the floor. Always demanding she bend down to pick it up. Always laughing that cruel laugh. Something broke inside her at that moment. It wasn't a rational decision. It was instinct. It was years of accumulated humiliation. It was the memory of who that man had once been, so different from the monster standing before her now. Melissa picked up the plate that was still on the tray. The filet mignon in red wine sauce was still steaming, perfectly golden roasted potatoes around it, a dish that cost 340 rays. She lifted the plate above Richard Blackwell's head and turned it all over him. The dark sauce dripped down his hair, his forehead, his wide eyes in shock. Pieces of meat slid down his expensive suit. Potatoes fell into his lap, staining the custom-tailored pants. The empty plate was still in her hand, trembling. For 3 seconds, no one moved. No one breathed. Then Richard exploded. "Have you lost your mind? Have you lost your mind?" He tried to stand up but slipped on the sauce that had fallen on the chair. The executives finally reacted, some jumping to help him, others just staring open-mouthed. Melissa put the empty plate on the table. Her hands were still shaking, but her voice came out firm, clear, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You asked me if I bark?" "No, Richard, I don't bark, and you should remember that. How dare you call me by my first name? You're nothing but a—" "I was Teacher Melissa," she interrupted and saw his face freeze. "Teacher Melissa Johnson. Remember me now?" Richard's eyes widened even more. The sauce kept dripping down his face, but he didn't even seem to notice anymore. "No, it can't be." "Franklin Public High School, 9th grade class, afternoon shift. You sat in the third desk of the second row. You always doodled your notebooks with drawings of buildings because you dreamed of being an architect or an engineer. You weren't sure yet." The color had drained from Richard's face. Even covered in food, even in the middle of the chaos, he was paralyzed. "I was a literature intern," Melissa continued, and now tears were streaming down her face, but her voice didn't waver. "I was 22. You were 15. You were such a different boy. So different from the disgusting man you've become. Melissa, teacher, I brought extra snacks for you because I knew you had nothing to eat at home. I lent you my books when you couldn't afford to buy them. I believed in you, Richard. I was the only one who did." One of the older executives cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. Another was already standing, looking for a discreet way out. "And now?" Melissa took off her waitress apron and threw it on the table. "Now you throw money on the floor for me to pick up as if I were nothing, as if I were less than nothing. Teacher, you need to understand. I didn't know it was you. Does that change anything?" Her voice rose in pitch. "If it weren't me, could you treat someone else like that? Could you humiliate someone just because you have money?" Richard tried to wipe his face with his hands, spreading the sauce even more. He opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out. The restaurant manager came running, alerted by the commotion. He was a gray-haired, thin man with glasses, who had always been polite but distant with Melissa. "What happened here, Mr. Blackwell? My God, she attacked me." Richard finally found his voice. "Threw food at me, in front of everyone." "Melissa." The manager turned to her, and there was already that tone of someone who's already made a decision. "You're fired. Get your things and leave immediately." "I was going to anyway," Melissa replied. "I can't stand another minute in this place." She walked past Richard very close and whispered low enough for only him to hear. "You were a good boy, Richard. What happened to you?" Then she left. She walked through the main dining room of the restaurant, where well-dressed customers had stopped eating to watch. She passed by the reception, where the woman with red lipstick widened her eyes. She pushed the glass door and stepped out into the noisy streets of New York City. Only when she was 3 blocks away did Melissa stop. She leaned against a wall and let her body slide down until she was sitting on the sidewalk. And then she cried. She cried everything she had held back for 3 months, for 3 months of humiliation, for 3 months watching the boy she had helped turn into that monster. An elderly woman passing by stopped and offered a tissue. Melissa thanked her without looking up. When she finally managed to control her crying, she took out her phone and called the one person who was always there for her. "Mom?" Her voice came out choked. "Mom, I made a huge mistake." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us, who are just starting out, now continuing. Martha Johnson was sitting in the small living room of the 2-bedroom apartment in the Astoria neighborhood when Melissa arrived. The old television was showing a soap opera, but it was on mute. Her mother, a 68-year-old woman with completely white hair tied in a low bun, stood up as soon as she heard the key in the door. "Melissa, my dear, what happened?" And Melissa told her everything, every detail. From the first day she saw Richard Blackwell entering that restaurant 3 months ago. How she had frozen upon recognizing him. How he clearly didn't recognize her. How every day was torture watching the boy she knew turn into a cruel man. "You did the right thing," Martha said when Melissa finished. "That boy needed someone to put him in his place." "Mom, I lost my job again. It's the third one this year. Something will come up, it always does." But Melissa knew it wouldn't be that simple. Richard Blackwell wasn't just rich, he was powerful. Owner of one of the largest construction companies in the country, had connections everywhere, and she had just humiliated him in front of his business partners. The phone rang the next morning. It was Jennifer, an old colleague who worked as a receptionist at another restaurant in the area. "Marie, you need to know something. Richard Blackwell is calling every establishment, every single one, telling them not to hire you." Melissa felt her stomach tighten. "What do you mean?" "He's using his influence, said you're unstable, dangerous, that you attacked him for no reason. Marie, no one's going to give you a job, not while he's doing this." In the following days, the reality of those words was confirmed. Melissa tried 3 restaurants, 2 cafes, a snack bar. Everywhere the answer was the same: "We're not hiring." But she could see it in their eyes. They knew who she was. The news had spread fast. A week later, Melissa was in the kitchen making chocolate truffles when Martha came in. "What are you doing, dear?" "If no one's going to hire me, I'll work for myself," Melissa replied, tapping the wooden spoon on the pan. "I'm going to sell sweets on the street." "Melissa, I have no choice, Mom. The bills won't pay themselves." She set up an improvised stand in Union Square, used an old folding table, a clean tablecloth, some plastic containers with chocolate truffles, coconut truffles, and peanut fudge balls she had made at home. It wasn't much, but it was something. On the first day, she sold $50. On the second, $70. On the third, she started to have regular customers: an elderly woman who bought chocolate truffles for her grandchildren, an office boy who loved peanut fudge balls, a couple who always stopped by in the late afternoon. Melissa was beginning to feel a glimmer of hope, small, fragile, but there, until he showed up. Not Richard personally, but his effects. On the 5th day, a city inspector arrived. "Documentation," he requested without much ceremony. I don't have it yet, but I'm working on it." "Then you can't sell here. I'm going to have to confiscate everything." "Please, sir, it's my livelihood. I just need a few more days to—" "The law is the law, miss." He took everything: the table, the cloth, the jars, the sweets. Melissa stood there watching the city vehicle drive away. She had lost not only her goods, but also the money she had invested in the ingredients. She tried another square the next day. Same thing, an inspector showed up in less than 2 hours. She tried near a subway station. Same thing. It wasn't a coincidence. Someone was tipping off the inspectors. And Melissa knew very well who that someone was. Richard Blackwell wasn't just preventing her from being hired. He was actively destroying any attempt she made to survive. Melissa went home that night with nothing. No money, no goods, no hope. Martha was in the living room, and she wasn't alone. A lady Melissa had never seen was sitting on the sofa. She must have been about 70, with short grey hair, a face marked by time but with lively, attentive eyes. She wore simple but clean clothes, a floral blouse and cotton pants. "Melissa," Martha stood up. "This is Mrs. Dorothy. She said she needs to speak with you." The older woman stood up with some difficulty, leaning on a wooden cane. "Melissa Johnson, the teacher who threw food at Richard Blackwell?" Melissa sighed. "Great. Another person coming to criticize." "Yes, that's me, and I already know what you're going to say, that I was crazy, that—" "You were brave," Dorothy interrupted, and a small smile appeared on her wrinkled face. "And I came to thank you." Melissa blinked, confused. "Thank me? Sit down, girl. This is a long conversation." They sat down. Martha brought coffee and stayed there, curious. Dorothy took a sip before beginning. "My full name is Dorothy Miller Blackwell. I am Richard's adoptive mother." Melissa almost dropped her coffee cup. "You are... But then why am I here?" "Because I saw everything. I was at the restaurant that day. Not in the private room, but in the main area. I saw when you ran out. I saw my son's face. Dorothy put the cup on the table and looked directly at Melissa. Richard called me furious, saying he had been attacked by a crazy ex-teacher. When he said your name, I remembered you. He talked about you a lot when he was a teenager. Teacher Melissa this, Teacher Melissa that. You made a difference in his life, girl. For the better. So he remembers me? Of course he does. He just pretended not to when he saw you at the restaurant because my son has become someone I don't recognize anymore. Dorothy sighed deeply, and it seemed that sigh carried years of disappointment. He wasn't like this. When Richard started making money, everything changed. Slowly at first, buying expensive clothes, then the apartment, then the car. And with the things came the attitudes, the arrogance, the contempt for others. How did he get so much money? Melissa asked. When he was in school, things were so tough. Architecture and then civil engineering. He studied hard, got a scholarship for college. He was brilliant, always was. He started working at a small construction company. Then he started his own. And it worked. It worked very well. Dorothy stirred her coffee absently. At first I thought it was just a phase, that he was excited about the success, but it got worse. He stopped visiting me. When I called, he was always busy. The few times we see each other, he talks about money, business, how much things cost, as if that's all that matters. Did you try talking to him? I tried. Many times. He just says I don't understand how the world works now, that I'm too old to understand. Melissa felt a wave of anger. The Richard she knew would never talk like that to anyone, much less his own mother. Why are you telling me this? Dorothy looked into her eyes with surprising intensity. Because I need your help. I need you to help me make my son remember who he was. Mrs. Dorothy, with all due respect, I think he's beyond saving. What I saw in that restaurant wasn't a man who made mistakes. It was a cruel man, downright malicious. I know, Dorothy agreed, and there was deep sadness in her voice. But I also know that somewhere inside there's still the boy you taught. The boy who cried when he finished reading The Great Gatsby because he identified with the character's loneliness. The boy who shared his lunch with a classmate even poorer than him. Melissa remembered those moments. They were distant memories, but they were there. Even if he exists, she said slowly, I don't know what I could do. He hates me now. He's using all his power to destroy me. I know. He told me he sent word to all the establishments not to hire you. He told me while laughing, as if it were funny. Martha made a sound of indignation but stayed quiet. Dorothy leaned forward. That's why I'm here. I want to offer you help. I live alone in a small house in Park Slope. I have a guest room. You can stay there while you get back on your feet. No charge. And in return you help me understand what happened to Richard, where I went wrong. Ma'am, it's not your fault. Maybe not. But I need to try. I need to do something before he's completely lost. And you were the only person who had the courage to stand up to him. The only one who wasn't afraid of his power. I need that courage. Melissa looked at her mom. Martha had that look that said, It's your decision, but think carefully. I don't know if I can help, Melissa admitted. I don't even know if I want to. Richard hurt me deeply. He still is. I understand more than you realize. He's hurting me too. How long do you think it's been since I've seen my real son? Not the businessman, not the millionaire, but Richard. Melissa didn't answer. She had no answer. I just ask that you think about it, Dorothy continued. Here's my address and phone number. If you change your mind, look me up. The offer stands. After Dorothy left, Martha poured more coffee for both of them. What are you going to do? I don't know, Mum. Part of me wants to accept just because I need a place to stay. Another part thinks this will go very wrong. And what is your heart saying? Melissa thought about the question. Her heart was saying something she didn't want to admit. That maybe Dorothy was right. That maybe there was still hope. But something else was also clear in her heart. Richard Blackwell needed to pay for what he did. Not just to her, but to all the others he had humiliated. And if she was going to do that, she needed a better plan than throwing food at him. 3 days later, Melissa was in front of a small but well-kept house in Park Slope. Light green gate, garden with flowers, porch with 2 rocking chairs. So different from the world of luxury Richard lived in now. She rang the bell. Dorothy answered with a smile. "I knew you would come." "How did you know?" "Because you're just like me. You can't give up on people." Melissa entered with the small suitcase she had. Dorothy showed her the room, simple, clean, with a single bed, an old wardrobe, and a window that looked out onto the backyard garden. "Make yourself at home," Dorothy said. "I'll make some tea." That night, sitting in the small kitchen, Dorothy began to tell the full story. Richard had been abandoned as a baby, left on the doorstep of a shelter in a poor neighborhood on the east side. No one ever found out who his biological parents were. He stayed in the shelter until he was 5, when Dorothy and her husband, Anthony, adopted him. "My husband passed away when Richard was 8, Dorothy recounted, her eyes distant. "Anthony was a construction worker. He had an accident on the job. He didn't survive." "I'm sorry. It was hard, very hard. I worked cleaning houses. I didn't earn much, but it was enough for the 2 of us." Richard was a quiet boy, observant. He saw everything, absorbed everything. When he grew up a bit more, he started saying he would never be poor, that he would be rich, important. Dorothy took another sip of tea. "I thought it was just a kid thing, a poor boy's dream, you know. But he took it seriously. He studied late, borrowed books from the library, did all his school assignments meticulously." "I remember him like that," Melissa said. "Always so dedicated. And you were important back then. He'd come home talking about you, about the new teacher who was different, who didn't look at him with pity, who treated him like someone special. You have no idea how much that meant." Melissa felt a tightness in her chest. She had just been an intern doing her best. She never imagined she had made such an impact. "What changed then?" she asked. "When did he start to become like this?" "I think it was gradual," Dorothy answered slowly. "When he opened the construction company and got his first big contract, he moved apartments. He left Astoria, went to a modern building in Tribeca, said he needed to be close to his clients. It made sense. But then he started visiting less, always busy, always rushing, and when he did come, he only complained about the life I led, said I could live better if I wanted to, that he had money to give me a big house, a maid, a car. I told him I didn't need it. He didn't understand." Dorothy looked around the small kitchen. "I've owned this house for 30 years. I bought it with the compensation money when my husband passed away. I saved every penny. It's simple, but it's mine. Why would I give that up?" But Richard didn't see it that way. Richard started to see everything as a sign of weakness. If you don't have money, you have no value. If you're not fighting to have more, you're settling. And settling to him is almost a sin. Melissa shook her head. How could someone change so much? "There was a day," Dorothy continued, her voice growing softer, "when he told me I should be grateful for everything he had achieved. Grateful. As if I hadn't done anything. As if it wasn't me who cleaned houses for years to give him clothes, food, school." "What did you say?" "I said he was right. That I was very grateful. Grateful to have raised a good boy. But that I was waiting to meet the good man he had become. Because so far, I had only seen the rich man." "Did he get angry?" "He did. Said I didn't understand anything. He slammed the door on his way out. He didn't speak to me for 2 months. They stayed silent for a moment. Outside, the sound of the city. Cars passing. Dogs barking. Life happening. "Why are you telling me all this?" Melissa finally asked. "Because you need to understand what we're dealing with," Dorothy replied, looking into her eyes. "Richard isn't just an arrogant man. He's someone who built an armor around his heart, and I no longer know how to get inside. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like the video and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. In the following days, Melissa tried to come up with a plan. But how do you confront someone so powerful? How do you make Richard see what he had become? The answer came unexpectedly. She was in the square near Dorothy's house, still trying to sell some sweets, hidden from the inspectors. when she saw a video on a customer's phone. It was her. It was the scene at the restaurant. Someone had filmed it. Not everything, but enough. You could see Melissa dumping the food on Richard's head. You could hear her words, "I was teacher Melissa. Remember me now?" The video had thousands of views, and the comments, "Finally, someone put that arrogant man in his place. I worked for his construction company. He's horrible to employees. My cousin got fired by him for accidentally spilling coffee, crying in front of everyone. That guy deserves much more than food dumped on his head." There were hundreds of comments like these, people sharing stories, experiences, humiliations. Melissa read everything with her heart racing. It wasn't just her. Richard had done this to many people, to so many people. She showed the video to Dorothy that evening. "You see?" Dorothy said sadly. "He left a trail of pain wherever he went. People are sharing this. It's going viral. He's going to be furious." And he was. The next day, Richard's lawyer sent a notification to Melissa, suing her for moral and material damages, demanding compensation of 300,000 Rs. Melissa read the letter with trembling hands. "I don't even have 3,000 Rs. How will I pay 300,000? Dorothy took the letter and read it too. "He's trying to scare you. It's working. Don't let him. That's exactly what he wants. For you to be silent, to disappear, to accept the victim role he gave you." "But I am the victim." "No," Dorothy said firmly. "You're the teacher who wasn't afraid to do the right thing, and you will continue to be." Melissa didn't know where to find courage, but she looked at that 70-year-old woman with wrinkles from a hard life but eyes full of determination, and something ignited inside her. "What do you think I should do?" Dorothy thought for a moment. "I think you should tell your story. The real one. Not just the video. The whole story." "How?" "There's a journalist who does stories about social injustices. Rebecca Williams. I've watched many of her reports. I think she'd be interested." And so, 3 days later, Melissa was sitting in a small studio, lights pointed at her, camera recording, telling everything. She told about teenage Richard, the poor boy who dreamed big, how she saw potential in him when no one else did, how she believed. She told about meeting him again at the restaurant, the surprise, the pain of seeing what he had become. She told about the humiliations, the money thrown on the floor, the insults, the disrespect, and she told about that last day, about finally fighting back. Rebecca Williams was a black woman of about 40, with loose curly hair, attentive eyes that missed no detail. "And then?" she asked. "What did he do after the incident?" "He's using all his power to destroy me, preventing me from working, sending inspectors after me, suing me for an amount I'll never be able to pay. Why? Why do you think he's doing this?" Melissa thought about the question, really thought. I think he's afraid," she said slowly. "Afraid that people will see who he really is, or worse, afraid that he himself will have to see." The interview aired 3 days later, and it exploded. It wasn't just 1,000 views, it was 100,000, 200,000, 500,000, 1 million. Everyone was talking, on social media, in WhatsApp groups, in workplace conversations. And then other people started giving interviews too. Former employees of the construction company, waiters from other restaurants, rideshare drivers who had driven for him, all with the same story. Richard Blackwell was cruel, arrogant, inhuman. His businesses started suffering, clients questioning, partners reconsidering, investors uncomfortable. Melissa watched everything from Dorothy's house, not knowing whether to feel victorious or just tired. "You did the right thing," Dorothy repeated. "He needed to be confronted. But what now? Will this change him? Or will it just make him even angrier?" The answer came faster than they expected. Richard showed up at Dorothy's house on a Thursday afternoon. Melissa was in the garden watering the plants when she heard the doorbell ring and his voice. "Mom! Mom! Open this door!" Dorothy rushed out before Melissa could stop her. When she opened the gate, Richard came in like a tornado. He looked different from that day at the restaurant. He still wore an expensive suit, but it was wrinkled. His eyes had dark circles. His hair was messy. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Are you sheltering her?" He pointed at Melissa. "Are you sheltering the woman who's trying to destroy me?" "Richard, calm down. Calm down. Mom, do you know what's happening? My name is Mud. I'm losing contracts, all because of her." He turned to Melissa, and there was something wild in his gaze. "You don't know when to stop, do you? Humiliating me wasn't enough. You had to go to the media, too." "I only told the truth," Melissa replied, keeping her voice calm even with her heart racing. "Truth? Truth? You told your twisted version." "Which part was twisted, Richard? The part where you threw money on the floor, or the part where you told everyone not to hire me?" He opened his mouth to respond, but Dorothy stepped between them. "Enough, both of you. Richard, you will listen to me now." "Mom, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly. I understand that you've become exactly what you hated most when you were a child. Do you remember what it was like to be looked down on? To be treated like you were worthless? That's how you felt when the other boys laughed at you for wearing old clothes. And now you do that to everyone." Richard recoiled as if he'd been slapped. "This is different." "Is it?" Dorothy took a step forward. "Explain to me how it's different." I worked hard to get where I am. No one gave me anything, I earned it. And Melissa doesn't work hard? The people you humiliate don't work hard? It's not the same thing. Why not? Because you have money now. Because you wear expensive suits. Does that make you better than others? Richard ran his hand through his hair, frustrated. "You don't understand how the world works. If you don't show strength, people walk all over you." "Who walked all over you, Richard?" Melissa spoke, and he looked at her surprised. "Seriously, who hurt you so much that you thought you needed to become this?" "No one asked you anything." "I'm asking," she insisted, "because the boy I knew wasn't like this. He was kind, shy but kind. He helped his classmates, shared the little he had." "That boy was an idiot," Richard shot back. "That boy was weak." "That boy was human," Melissa corrected. "And I feel very sorry for you if you think humanity is weakness." Richard fell silent, his chest rising and falling rapidly, breathing heavily. For a moment, Melissa thought he would explode again. But then, "You didn't show up," he said quietly. "What?" "At my graduation. You promised you'd come, and you didn't show up." Melissa felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. "Richard!" "I waited. I kept looking at the auditorium entrance the whole time. I thought you'd show up at the last minute, but you never came." His voice was different now. It wasn't anger, it was pure hurt. "I thought you cared, that I mattered to you, but in the end it was just work, right? Just another poor student you pretended to care about." "No," Melissa said, and now tears were streaming down her face. "It wasn't like that. I cared, I still care. I didn't go because you didn't want to," he finished bitterly. "Because my husband was dying." The silence that fell was absolute. Richard blinked. "What?" "My husband, Anthony. Not the same person who raised you." She looked at Dorothy. "Another Anthony. I got married soon after I stopped teaching. He had leukemia. He fought it for years. That day, the day of your graduation, was his last day. He passed away at 6 in the evening at Memorial Hospital." Her tears were falling non-stop now. "I wanted to go. I had bought new clothes. I had rehearsed what I was going to say to you, how proud I was. But then the doctors called me, telling me to rush over, that he wouldn't hold on much longer, and I—" Her voice faltered. Dorothy went to her and held her hand. "I wrote a letter," Melissa continued. "Explained everything. But I never sent it. I thought you'd think it was an excuse, that you wouldn't believe me. And then I spent months in mourning trying to survive alone, and when I finally managed to pull myself together, so much time had passed." Richard was pale, completely pale. I didn't know." "How could you? I didn't tell you." "I should have told you, but I was broken, Richard, completely broken." He sat in one of the porch chairs, suddenly looking much smaller. "All these years," he murmured, "all these years I thought you had abandoned me." "And you decided you would never let anyone hurt you like that again," Dorothy added softly. So you built walls, pushed everyone away. I didn't realize. Do you realize now? Melissa asked. Do you realize what you've become trying to protect yourself? Richard looked up at her, and there was so much confusion, so much pain in his gaze. I don't know how to go back, he admitted, his voice broken. I don't know how to be that person again. No one is asking you to go back, Dorothy said. That person doesn't exist anymore. You grew up, you lived, you suffered. But you can choose who you want to be now. And that choice starts with truly looking at what you've done. Richard covered his face with his hands. His shoulders trembled. Melissa looked at Dorothy, not knowing what to do. The older woman just shook her head, signaling to let him process. After what felt like an eternity, Richard stood up. His eyes were red. I'm going to think, he said, about everything. And then he left. He got into the imported car and drove away. Dorothy and Melissa stayed on the porch, listening to the engine fade away. Do you think anything will change? Melissa asked. I don't know, Dorothy answered honestly. But for the first time in years, he listened. He didn't yell, he didn't run away, he didn't make light of it. He listened. And now? Now we wait. And we keep living. But life didn't stop to wait. The next day, Melissa woke up to Dorothy's phone ringing non-stop. It was 6 in the morning. She left the room worried and found the older woman in the living room, watching TV with a shocked expression. What is it? Look, Dorothy pointed to the TV. It was a report about Richard Blackwell. But it wasn't about the scandal. It was about the construction company. Apparently, while all the personal drama was happening, the company was in serious financial trouble. A major investor had pulled out their money. An important contract had been cancelled. And now there were debts, lots of debts. He didn't tell me anything, Dorothy murmured. Maybe he doesn't know how to, Melissa replied. Admitting problems must be hard for someone who always pretended to be perfect. Dorothy's phone rang. It was Richard. Hello? Melissa couldn't hear what he was saying, but she saw Dorothy's face growing more and more worried. Richard, calm down. We'll figure it out. Yes, I know. No, you're not going to lose everything. We'll talk, okay? Okay, come here later. No, come, please. She hung up and looked at Melissa. He's desperate. Thinks he's going to lose the company. And is he? I don't know. But I know he needs help. And this time he asked for it. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Richard showed up in the late afternoon, still in his suit, but this time clearly having not slept for more than a day. He sat in Dorothy's kitchen and accepted the coffee she offered. Everything is falling apart, he said bluntly. The company, the contracts, everything. Because of the scandal? Melissa asked. Partly, but also because I was arrogant. I bet too high. I signed contracts without reading them properly. I trusted people who only wanted my money. He took a sip of coffee. And now they're all abandoning me. The partners, the associates, even people I thought were friends. They vanished. When I needed them, there was no one. Welcome to the club, Melissa couldn't resist saying. Richard looked at her, and to Melissa's surprise, he didn't get angry. I deserve that, he said. I deserve all of this. It's the universe giving back everything I did. It's not the universe, Dorothy said. It's consequences. You made choices, and now you're reaping the results. And what do I do? It depends, Melissa replied. What do you want to do? Richard thought for a long moment. I want to fix things. I don't know if it's possible, but I want to try. Fix what? The company or yourself? Both. Everything. Dorothy and Melissa exchanged a look. There was sincerity there, perhaps for the first time. Then start with the employees, Dorothy said. With those you mistreated. With the people you hurt. How? They hate me. With good reason, Melissa added. But if you really want to change, you have to start somewhere. In the following days, Richard tried. He called former employees to apologize. Some hung up on him, others listened, but didn't believe him. A few agreed to talk. Melissa watched it all from a distance. She didn't trust him completely yet. Years of hurt don't disappear with a few pretty words. But then something happened that she didn't expect. Richard showed up at Dorothy's house with a proposal. "I want you to work with me," he said to Melissa. "What?" "At the company, Human Resources. You know how to handle people. I clearly don't. I need someone to teach me, to stop me from becoming that monster again." "Richard, I know you have every reason to say no. I treated you horribly. I tried to destroy your life, but I'm asking for a chance to do things differently." Melissa looked at Dorothy. The older woman said nothing, just watched. "I'll think about it," Melissa finally replied, "but I'm not promising anything." "That's more than I deserve," he admitted. That night, Melissa couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the proposal. Part of her wanted to refuse just to hurt him, to give back a little of the pain he caused. But another part, the part that had been a teacher, that had seen potential in that poor boy so many years ago, wanted to believe that people can change. She got out of bed and went to the living room. Dorothy was there too, unable to sleep. "What do you think?" Melissa asked. "I think it's your decision," Dorothy replied. "But can I tell you something? My son is asking for help. For the first time in his adult life, he's admitting he doesn't know everything, that he needs someone. That's huge for him. But what if it's just manipulation? What if he goes back to being what he was? It could happen. Real change is hard. People have relapses, but it could also be genuine, and you'll never know if you don't try." Melissa thought of all the students she had over the years. Some changed for the better, others didn't. But she always gave them a chance. "I'll accept," she said finally. "But with conditions." The next day she sat with Richard in a simple coffee shop, far from his corporate world. "I accept working with you," she began. "But not for you. For the employees you still have. For the people who need those jobs and deserve to be treated with dignity. I understand. And there are rules. First, I won't accept humiliation from anyone. If you or anyone else treats me badly, I leave, without warning, without a second chance." "I agree." "Second, you'll listen to me, even when you don't like what I have to say, especially when you don't like it. It might be hard, but I'll try. Third, this is a trial, 3 months. If I see that nothing is really changing, I'm out." Richard nodded. "And one more thing," Melissa added. "You will apologize to every person you mistreated, personally, looking them in the eyes, and you'll accept it if they don't forgive you. That will take time. You have the rest of your life. Better start now." And so began one of the strangest phases of Melissa's life, working alongside the man who had tried to destroy her. The construction company's office was huge, glass, steel, a view of the city, so different from her world. But Melissa wasn't intimidated. She had work to do. The first day was tense. The employees looked at her with curiosity. Some had already seen the video. Others had heard about it. The waitress who threw food at the boss now worked with him. Melissa gathered everyone in the auditorium. "I know it seems strange," she began. "You must be wondering why I'm here. The truth is, I'm wondering too. But I'll be direct with you. I came because I think things can change. I don't know if they will, but I'll try to make them change." A man in his 30s raised his hand. "And if it doesn't change, if he goes back to being what he was, then I'll leave, and you'll have every right to leave too. But while I'm here, I promise I'll fight for everyone to be treated with respect." She looked at Richard, who was in the corner of the room watching. "And that starts now. Richard has something to say." Richard walked to the front. Melissa saw he was nervous. Good. He should be. He began, and his voice faltered. He cleared his throat. "I want to apologize to all of you." Silence in the room. "I was a horrible boss. I treated you badly. Humiliated people. I made many of you cry. Fear coming to work. Feel like you were worthless. And I was wrong. Completely wrong." Some employees exchanged glances. Others kept skeptical expressions. "I don't expect you to forgive me," Richard continued. "Not immediately, maybe never. But I'm here to say I will change. And if I fail, If I fall back into old habits, I want you to tell me, to my face, without fear of retaliation." "How can we trust that?" a young woman asked. "How do we know you won't fire us if we confront you?" "You don't," Richard admitted. "Only time will tell, but Melissa is here exactly for that, to make sure I don't become that person again." It was a start. Small, fragile, but a start. The following weeks were challenging. Richard had years of toxic behavior to unlearn. He still had outbursts, still spoke without thinking. But when Melissa pointed it out, he stopped, thought, apologized. It wasn't perfect, far from it, but it was different. The employees began to relax a bit, not completely. Broken trust takes time to rebuild, but the atmosphere was changing, slowly, but changing. Melissa created an anonymous suggestion box where any employee could leave feedback, complaints, ideas. Richard hated the idea at first. "They'll just complain about me," he said. "Probably," Melissa agreed. "And you'll read each one and think about what to do differently." The first messages were harsh, very harsh. Melissa read some and was shocked by the level of hurt people carried. "He made me cry in front of everyone because I miscalculated something. I worked sick because I was afraid of being fired if I missed work. My marriage almost ended because of the stress from here." Richard read every message. Melissa saw the impact on his face, saw him beginning to understand the trail of pain he had left. "How was I so blind?" he asked one day, after reading a particularly painful message. "Because you stopped seeing people as people," Melissa answered. "You saw everyone as pieces on a board, tools to use." "How do I fix this?" "By starting to see again. For real." That's when Richard had an idea. He wanted to spend a day doing the work of every department in the company, starting from the bottom. "This is ridiculous," some partners said. "The CEO doing work of people I employ," Richard interrupted. "People who work hard and whom I never appreciated." And so he spent an entire week, Monday in cleaning, Tuesday at reception, Wednesday in the archives, Thursday with the field engineers, Friday in customer service. Melissa accompanied him on some of these days. She saw Richard struggling with tasks he thought were simple, being corrected by people who previously would never dare speak to him, learning. By the end of the week he was exhausted, but there was something different in his eyes. "I had no idea," he told Melissa. "No idea how many things happen that I never saw, how much work goes into every small task. Now you know. Now I know," he repeated, "and I won't forget." But life wasn't getting easier. The company still had financial problems. Richard had to make tough choices, cut expenses, renegotiate contracts, and then came the hardest decision. He needed to lay off some people. "There's no other way," the accountant explained. "Either we cut 20% of the staff or the company sinks." Richard stayed silent for a long time. Then he looked at Melissa. "What do you think I should do?" "I think you need to be honest," she answered. "Call everyone, explain the real situation. Let people know what's happening. Because if you just fire them without explaining, it'll seem like you've gone back to being who you were." Richard followed the advice. He gathered all the employees and explained the financial situation, showed numbers, was transparent about the debts, the lost contracts, the challenges ahead. "I need to lay off 20% of you," he said, and the pain was visible in his voice. "And it'll be the hardest thing I've ever done, because now I know you. I know your names, your families, your dreams." Heavy silence in the room. "But I'll do it differently this time. I'll give 3 months' notice, I'll pay fair severance, I'll give recommendation letters for everyone, and I'll personally help each person find new employment." "How do we know you'll follow through?" someone asked. "You don't. But Melissa will make sure she'll monitor each case," and he did. Every promise. Melissa made sure of it. The layoffs were painful, some people cried, some were angry, but nobody was thrown out like trash. Each person was treated with dignity. One of those laid off, a man around 50 named Charles, came to speak with Richard before leaving. "I worked here for 10 years, he said. "And I never thought I'd say this, but thank you. For the honesty. for treating us like people. Richard shook his hand firmly. I'm sorry I didn't do this before. After everyone had gone, Richard sat in his office chair and cried. Melissa came in and found him like that. It hurts, he said. It hurts so much to do the right thing. It always does, she answered. But you're doing it, and that's what matters. The following months were about rebuilding. The company was smaller but more united. The employees who stayed worked with more dedication, not out of fear, but because they felt valued. Richard changed other things too. Created a scholarship program for employees' children, improved benefits, instituted flexible hours for those with young children. It's going to be expensive, the finance department warned. I'd rather spend on people than invest in things, Richard answered. The company still struggled, but it was surviving, and Richard was changing, for real. But there was one conversation that still needed to happen, a conversation Melissa had been putting off. One day, she asked Richard to have lunch with her, not at a fancy restaurant, at a simple diner near the office. I need to ask you a question, she said, when the sandwiches arrived. And I want you to be honest. Okay. Why did you pretend not to recognize me, that day at the restaurant, when you saw me for the first time? I saw it in your eyes. You recognized me, but you pretended you didn't. Richard stayed quiet for a moment. He moved his sandwich around without eating. Because it hurts too much, he finally admitted, seeing you, remembering who I was, the boy you knew, and knowing how much I've changed, how much I failed. Then why did you treat me so badly? Because if I treated you well, I'd have to admit that I remembered. I'd have to confront everything I've become. It was easier to pretend you were just another waitress, just another unimportant person. He looked at her with honest eyes. But you were never unimportant. You were the most important person in my teenage years, the only one who truly believed in me. And I hurt you because I was afraid to confront that truth. Melissa felt the tears coming but held them back. You hurt me a lot, Richard. I know. And I'll carry that forever. But you're trying to change. For real. I am. Not because of the company. Not because of the public image, but because looking in the mirror and seeing what I had become was killing me. They ate in silence for a while. Then Melissa spoke. I forgive you. Richard raised his eyes, surprised. What? I forgive you, not because you deserve it, but because I need to. I need to let the anger go. I need to move forward. Melissa, But, she continued, forgiving doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean I trust you completely. It means I'm willing to give you this chance, to see if the change is real. Richard nodded, too emotional to speak. Don't disappoint me again, Melissa said firmly, because if you go back to being that man, I won't throw food at you. I'll simply walk away and never look back. I won't, he promised. I won't let that happen. The days turned into weeks. The weeks into months. Life went on. The company began to stabilize. New contracts appeared. They weren't the huge ones from before, but they were honest. They were sustainable. Richard sold the luxury apartment and moved to a smaller one. He sold the imported car and bought a domestic one. He cut personal expenses drastically. I don't need this, he told Dorothy when she asked. I never did. I just thought I did. And he started visiting his mother regularly, every week, sometimes just for dinner, sometimes just to talk. Melissa saw the changes and began to truly believe. It wasn't perfect. Richard still had difficult moments. He still fought against his old self. But he was fighting. And that was what mattered. One day, 6 months after everything had started, Richard called Melissa into the office. I want to show you something. He took her to the auditorium. When he opened the door, Melissa saw all the employees there. Confused, she entered. What's going on? Richard went to the front. Melissa, when you arrived here, this company was broken. Not financially, that was already bad, but morally, spiritually. I had created a place where people were afraid to come to work. He looked at the employees. You changed that. Not alone. Everyone here changed. But you were the spark. the person who wasn't afraid to confront me, to show me the mirror. Richard, what? That's why I want to offer you a partnership, 20% of the company. Not as a favor, as a merit, for everything you've done and continue to do. Melissa was breathless. I don't know what to say. Say you accept. Say you'll stay here keeping me on the right path, keeping all of us on the right path. Melissa looked around. She saw the faces of the employees, some smiling, others nodding encouragement. I accept, she said, but only if you promise one thing. What? That we're going to create a mentorship program for public high school students, like you used to be. Give them the chances you had. Richard smiled, a real smile, one that reached his eyes. It's already created. I approved it yesterday. The program is called Teacher Melissa, and that's how the story could have ended, with reconciliation, change, a happy ending. But life isn't that simple. 2 weeks later, Dorothy called Melissa in the middle of the night. Melissa, her voice was trembling, I need you at the hospital now. Melissa arrived in 20 minutes. She found Richard in the hallway, sitting with his head in his hands. What happened? She fainted, he said without looking up. Just collapsed. The doctors are examining her now. They waited. 1 hour, 2, 3. Finally, a doctor came out. A woman around 40, white coat, serious expression. Family of Dorothy Blackwell? Richard and Melissa stood up. She had a stroke, the doctor explained. Not severe, but concerning. She'll need care, physical therapy, constant monitoring. Will she be okay? Richard asked, voice breaking. With proper treatment and time, yes, but it will be a long process. Richard nearly collapsed with relief. Melissa held his arm. Can I see her? You can. But she's sleeping now. She'll wake up in a few hours. When Dorothy finally woke up, Richard was by the bed holding her hand. Melissa was in the chair beside them. Hi, Mom, Richard said softly. My son, Dorothy murmured, voice weak. You're here. I'll always be. I'll never leave you alone again. Nonsense, but she smiled. You have a company to run. The company can wait. You can't. Dorothy looked at Melissa. Thank you, she said, for not giving up on him. I didn't give up, Melissa replied, because you didn't give up first. The recovery weeks were challenging. Dorothy needed help with basic things. Richard took leave from work. Melissa temporarily took over the company, and Richard learned to care, to have patience, to do the little things that make a difference. One night, while helping Dorothy with her physical therapy exercises, she said, You know what makes me happiest? What? Seeing who you've become now. Not the businessman, not the rich man, but the man, the good man I always knew was in there. Richard felt tears coming. I almost lost that. I almost lost you without ever being that man. But you didn't lose. I'm here. And you're here, truly here, for the first time in years. Dorothy's recovery took months, but she improved. Slowly, but she improved. And Richard was there every step of the way. The company kept running. Melissa proved to be a capable leader. When Richard returned, he found things not just running, but improving. You did an amazing job, he told her. We did, she corrected. This isn't your company anymore. It's ours. It's everyone's who works here. Richard nodded, and he realized he liked it better this way. One day, a year after the restaurant incident, Richard asked Melissa to go with him somewhere. She didn't know where, just got in the car. They stopped in front of Franklin Public High School. Why are we here? Melissa asked. Because I need to do something. They went inside. The school looked different, older, needing renovations, but the essence was the same. Richard went to the classroom where Melissa had taught so many years ago. It was empty now, recess time. He sat in the third desk of the second row, where he used to sit. You know what I remember most, he said. You saying that each of us had potential, that it didn't matter where we came from. It mattered where we were going. Melissa sat in the teacher's chair. Did you believe that? I did. For a long time. And then I forgot. I thought where I was going was more important than who I was along the way. He looked around the classroom. I want to donate money to this school, renovate it, buy equipment, create a library, not for marketing, not for image, but because maybe there's another boy here who needs to believe he can go far. Richard, and I want you to coordinate this. You know what schools need, what teachers need, what students need. Melissa felt her heart tighten with emotion. You've really changed, haven't you? I'm changing, he corrected. Every day, it's a process. Some days are easier than others, but I'm trying. They left the school together, and Melissa felt she had finally found peace. Peace with the past, peace with Richard, peace with herself. 6 months later, the school renovation was complete. There was an inauguration ceremony. The whole community was there. Students, teachers, parents. Richard gave a short speech. I studied here when I was a boy. I was poor, lost, without direction, but I had teachers who believed in me. One teacher in particular. He looked at Melissa. She taught me that kindness isn't weakness, that respect is worth more than money, that everyone deserves dignity. I forgot those lessons for a long time. But she didn't give up on teaching me again. People applauded. Melissa had tears in her eyes. This school is for the students, but it's also a reminder for me of what really matters. Life went on. The company grew again, but differently, sustainably, ethically. Richard was no longer the arrogant billionaire. He was a respected businessman, not out of fear, but out of genuine respect. Melissa continued being the company's conscience and his friend, because that's what they had become. Friends, united by a painful past, but committed to a better future. Dorothy recovered completely. She returned to her home, to her garden, to her simple life, and Richard visited her every week without fail, not because he had to visit, but because he wanted to. One day, 2 years after everything had started, Melissa was in the office when she received a message. It was from a young woman who had seen the video of the incident at the restaurant. She was going through a similar situation, being humiliated by her boss, afraid to react, but inspired by Melissa's courage. "Today I left that job," the message said, "because you showed me that we don't have to accept being treated like that. Thank you for being brave." Melissa showed the message to Richard. "Look at this," she said. "Your worst humiliation became inspiration for other people." "It wasn't humiliation," Richard replied. "It was an awakening, the best thing that ever happened to me." And it was true. From that spilled plate of food, a transformation was born. Not instant, not perfect, but real. Richard learned that power without humanity is cruelty, that wealth without kindness is poverty, that success without respect is failure. And Melissa learned that forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's choosing not to let the pain of the past poison the future. They continued working together, building not just a company but a legacy, proving that people can change, that it's never too late to choose to be better. And every time Richard was about to fall back into old habits, all Melissa needed to do was look at him. Just look. And he remembered the boy he was, the monster he became, and the man he chose to be. The Riverside restaurant still existed. Richard never went back there. Not because he was ashamed, but because he no longer needed to prove anything to anyone. He preferred simple places now, the diners, the pubs, where people were real and conversations were honest. One afternoon, 3 years after the incident, Richard and Melissa were in a meeting when the secretary entered. "There's someone here to see you," she said. "Says it's urgent." It was Charles, the employee who had been fired years ago. But he wasn't alone. He was with 3 other former employees. "We came to bring a proposal," Charles said. "A proposal?" "We started a small consulting firm. It's going well, and we wanted to propose a partnership with you." Richard and Melissa exchanged surprised glances. "You want to work with us again?" "Not with us," Charles corrected. "With you, Richard. With the man you are now. Because what we've seen in recent years, that's the kind of leadership we want to support." The partnership was sealed, and it became one of the company's most productive, because trust, once broken and then rebuilt, becomes even stronger, like a broken bone that grows stronger at the sight of the fracture. The years passed. The company continued to grow. It didn't return to being the giant it once was, but it was solid, sustainable. A place where people wanted to work. Richard never forgot the lessons. Some days were harder than others. There were stressful moments where the urge to yell, to demand, to humiliate almost won. But Melissa was always there, and Dorothy, reminding him of who he chose to be. And Richard developed his own reminders. He kept an old photo in his office, of himself at 15. Thin, old clothes, a shy smile. Next to him a young Melissa, freshly graduated, eyes full of hope. "To never forget," read the caption he had written. Melissa also changed. Not in essence, but in confidence. She, who had spent years in jobs where she was invisible, was now respected, heard, valued, and she used that to help others. She created mentorship programs, not only in the company but in schools, in communities, anywhere she saw young people needing direction. Because she understood now. She understood the power of believing in someone, of seeing potential where others see only poverty or problems. One evening at a dinner at Dorothy's house, the three of them were sitting on the porch. Dorothy at 74, hair completely white, but eyes still lively and attentive. Richard at 45, some lines around his eyes but a more genuine smile. Melissa at 37, a few grey strands beginning to appear, but a peace she never had before. "You know what I'm most proud of?" Dorothy said suddenly. "Of what, Mom?" "It's not the company, it's not the money you recovered, it's the man you became. The man I finally recognize as my son." Richard held her hand. "I only made it here because of you two. You didn't give up, even when I deserved to be given up on." "We never give up on the people we love," Dorothy said simply. Melissa looked at the stars. She thought about the whole journey, the humiliations, the anger, the forgiveness, the rebuilding. "Have you ever thought," she said, "that if I hadn't thrown that food, none of this would have happened? You'd still be that man. The company would still be that toxic place." "I think about that every day," Richard admitted. "And I'm grateful. Grateful for your courage, for giving me the shock I needed. Sometimes," Melissa reflected, "the best things come from the worst moments. If my husband hadn't gotten sick, I would have gone to your graduation. You wouldn't have developed that resentment. Maybe you never would have become so cruel, but also maybe you never would have learned these lessons." "I don't know if I believe everything happens for a reason," Richard said, "but I believe we can give reason to everything that happens. We can choose to grow from the pain." They stayed there talking until late, laughing about memories, planning the future, simply enjoying each other's company, because that's what they had become, a family, not by blood, but by choice. Brought together by unlikely circumstances, but committed by true love. And when Melissa finally went home that night, she looked in the mirror. She saw a woman different from the one she was 3 years ago. Stronger, more confident, more at peace. She had faced the monster, and discovered that beneath the monster there was still a boy. A frightened, hurt, lost boy. A boy who just needed to remember who he truly was, and that memory had changed everything. End of story. So, what did you think of this journey? From the moment Melissa dumped that plate of food to Richard's complete transformation, it was an emotional roller coaster, wasn't it? Tell us, do you believe people can really change? Have you ever been in a similar situation where you had to confront someone or forgive something difficult? Share your experience here in the comments. We love reading every sincere word from you. And don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other touching stories that will move your heart.